Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Tommy, and today I'm going to show you how I made this all-in-one board milling station with an integrated dust collection system. Whether it's your first time here or even if you've been here before, welcome to 1 Minute Workbench. So I had built a cart for my jointer, and I was intending on building a very similar cart for my planer, but I kept thinking about the fact that every time I use one of these machines, I also have to set up a dust collection system. I also kept thinking about the fact that every time I use one of these machines, I'm very likely to use the other one as well. So with that in mind, it just made sense to design this all-in-one solution. I used Baltic birch plywood for this project, and to break down the bigger pieces, I used my homemade circular saw track. If you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out. It's a really easy build and very useful. It took a few hours to cut all of the pieces, so I won't be showing all of the cuts in this video. That said, fully detailed plans for this project are available on my website. For the most part, the cuts are all straight and the pieces are just simple rectangles. The only secondary cuts needed are a few small notches and one curvy piece that we'll get to later on. To cut the small notches, I just used a dovetail saw, and my workbench has plenty of places to clamp the boards while making these cuts. I drew double lines the exact thickness of the material anywhere internal pieces were supposed to go. That way I would be able to align those internal pieces perfectly. I started by shooting these two pieces together since they make a T shape and would be a good base to build everything else around. I clamped them and let them dry overnight. For a lot of the pieces, I also flipped them over and transferred the double lines to the other side. That way I'd know where to fire pin nails and drive screws. Since the bottom wasn't going to be exposed, I decided to use screws. This makes it to where I didn't have to figure out a way to clamp the bottom or wait for glue to dry before I kept going on with the project. I did not add glue right up front, but instead started by adding the screws. This way, I could take my time to make sure each screw was in the exact right spot, all the while making sure to drill pilot holes and countersinks. After that, I removed all of the screws, added glue, and then put the screws back in place. I continued adding pieces and it was going together very quickly. I used nails for most places, but still tried to use screws on anything that wouldn't be exposed in order to help keep moving along at a fast pace and not have to wait for the glue to dry. This one piece was a little tricky because it required nails to be shot at an angle, but everything else was pretty straightforward. I didn't have a good way to clamp this in piece, so I put some weights on it, but I could see that they weren't really doing anything. So then I threw this 50-pounder on it, and that did the trick. That was it for the screws on this job. The rest of the pieces needed to be secured using only pins, glue, and clamps. I added these 4 small squares in the corners to give the wheels of the unit a little bit more thickness to screw into. I used a combination of clamps and the heavy weights to make sure the top was perfectly flat. This one spot had a little bit of overhang, so I cleaned it up with a hand plane. I didn't intend for any of the screws to be exposed, but I made a mistake somewhere along the way and wound up with this one, so I just replaced it with a dowel. Because I don't have a flush cut saw, I used a hacksaw blade to get the job done. At this point, the cabinet was starting to get heavy, so I added the wheels to make it easier to move around the shop. Building the drawers was straightforward. I used all butt joints, just like on the cabinet, and I used 1/2" material for the sidewalls and 1/4" material for everything else. As a test on one runner, I measured a drawer slide, then added marks half that distance up from the bottom of the drawer. I then added marks at each screw location. I drilled pilot holes and screwed the runner in place while its front end was flush with the front of the drawer box. This worked out great, so I repeated that process for all the drawers. I also got faster as I went along. I drew matching marks inside the cabinet that would align with the runners on the drawers. And again, I drilled pilot holes. For any of the holes that were on the outside walls of the cabinet, I used a piece of plywood as a depth stop to prevent me from drilling all the way through. And you can see that really well right here. I used a small wooden jig to help me determine the correct depth for each of the slides. I had originally thought that I might add the drawer faces while the drawers were in position to help me get perfect alignment, but the spacing looked really good, so I decided to just go for it. In the end, they did require some adjustment, but it wasn't that bad. I sanded everything with 150 grit sandpaper and then added 6 coats of satin water-based polyurethane. I added smooth curved drawer handles so they would be less likely to catch on clothing or anything else. I moved the joiner onto the unit so I'd be able to see where to add my Dust Deputy dust separator. I drew a circle around the base, found its center, and drilled out a 3-inch hole which matches the bottom of the dust separator. I then added the planer to the unit so I could further refine the positioning of both machines. I removed everything from the unit and flipped it over to start working on creating a seal for the dust bucket, but I realized that wasn't going to work out very well, so I decided on a different approach. I cut a bicycle inner tube along its inside diameter and then along its outside diameter. This gave me a piece that had exactly the shape I needed to create a gasket around the top of the bucket. I trimmed it to just the right size and then secured it in place using aluminum tape. Luckily, the tape was wide enough that I was able to cut it in half and use half of it to secure the outside edge and the other half to secure the inside edge. I had an idea for how to secure the bucket in place, but wasn't 100% sure how to go about it. After some testing, I refined the shapes I needed. And here I'm just smoothing out this curve using my homemade disc sander. With the pieces done, I secured them in place using glue and pin nails. The mechanism works by simply wedging the bucket in place, and with the rubber seal at the top, it holds in place very securely. I tested the positioning of the dust separator with a dust collection hose to make sure I'd have the best angle possible to share between the two machines. With that determined, I drilled pilot holes and secured the dust separator in place. I secured the jointer in place with a screw in each one of the 4 corners. I then did the same exact thing for the planer. With the planer and the jointer secured to the unit, there's just enough space between the 2 of them to allow for normal function. I measured all of the ports that needed adapters and then created 3D models for each one of the adapters using CAD software. I then used a 3D printer to print out the actual adapters. You can probably buy adapters like this, but in my experience, the ones you buy never quite fit right and can be somewhat expensive. I'll make the files for these adapters available as a free download on my website. I used a hose clamp to secure the dust collection hose to the machine end and foil tape to secure it to the adapter end, but I eventually came back and replaced the foil tape with hose clamps anyway because the foil tape didn't stick to the flexible hose very well. I did this for both machines. I made an adapter for the vacuum as well because I would need to be able to quickly remove it when using the planer since it has its own blower. With all of the dust collection hoses in place, I was able to then choose a spot for routing the vacuum hose and the power cords. I picked a spot that would not interfere with the planer's outfeed and also would not put too sharp of a bend in the vacuum hose. I just eyeballed the location for this shallow electrical box and traced it with a pencil. I then used a drill to get the cut started and finished it with a jigsaw. The hole isn't perfect, but that's okay. The edges will be covered by a faceplate. I wired up a switch and routed the cable to the back of the unit where I installed a series of outlets. Three of these outlets are always on, but one is controlled by the switch. This makes it to where I can operate the vacuum independent of the 2 machines. It also gives me one free outlet. I have the vacuum in the on position, and here you can see that if I plug it into one of the other outlets, it immediately comes on. When it's plugged into the switched outlet, it only comes on if you flip the switch. This is great because only the jointer requires a vacuum. Again, this is because the planer has its own blower. Here you can see the dust separator sending chips down into the dust bucket. To switch over to using the planer, you just remove the vacuum from the dust separator and swap the joiner's hose over for the planer's hose. And the bucket does a nice job of catching all the chips. And last but not least, the drawers give me a ton of great storage space. The process of milling boards used to take up a lot of space in my garage and was pretty inefficient. This unit takes up about half the space and does a much better job. All in all, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm excited that I no longer have to dread setting up for milling and planing boards. And again, if you want to make one of these for yourself, you can download the plans from my website. Hey, thanks for watching. I really hope you liked this video. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell icon. That way you get notified every time I put out a new episode. I'd love to hear what you think about this all-in-one board milling station in the comments section below. And if you have any quick questions you want answered, hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And until the next time I see you, I hope you have fun building something.